A broken heart and a broken bone activate many of the same pain centers in the brain. I remember the first time I learned that, I sat with it for a while. Because if that's true, it explains a lot. It explains why some experiences stay long after they're over, and why some people can spend years wondering what's wrong with them when nothing is actually wrong. I know I did. Years ago, I worked as an operating room nurse. Part of my job was making sure patients were safe before surgery. That responsibility mattered to me. As I reviewed the charts and prepared patients, I started noticing something that concerned me. A surprising number of patients scheduled for elective surgery and joint placement had gum disease, which is an active infection. An infection that raised real concerns about whether their surgery should move forward safely. So I spoke up. I informed the surgeons because that was my job. What I wasn't expecting was to be told to stop. At first, I thought, there must be some misunderstanding. There hadn't. I was told that if I continued bringing it up, I'd be terminated. I remember how unsettling that felt. I wasn't trying to create problems. I was trying to protect patients. For a while, I wrestled with something that didn't feel much like any choice at all. If I stayed silent, or should I leave? After 30 years, I resigned. At the time, I believed I was doing the right thing, and I still do to this day. But what I didn't understand was what came next. When my chest hurt, I didn't connect it to what had happened. When it felt hard to breathe, I thought it was something else. When ordinary things suddenly took more energy than they should have, I assumed I'm just tired. Looking back now, I don't think those things were separate. Maybe you've experienced something like that yourself. A relationship ends, a job ends, someone you love dies. Life moves on, at least on the outside. You go back to work, you make dinner, you answer emails, you do all the things you're supposed to do, and yet something feels different. You don't quite feel like yourself. You get tired more easily than you used to, or find yourself reacting to things that never used to bother you. Sometimes it's a tightness in your chest, or that feeling in your stomach when something catches you off guard. Or it could be just harder to relax than it used to be. What makes this confusing is that these things often show up long after the original experience is over. You can be just sitting in your living room on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday and suddenly feel sad, anxious, or overwhelmed. And there may not seem to be any reason for it, at least not one you can immediately see. I want to stay here for a moment because this is the part that trips most people up. We live in a world that moves fast. There isn't a lot of space given to the idea that something inside might still be processing what the mind has already filed away. So when those feelings show up without an obvious cause, most people's first instinct is to wonder, what's wrong with me? Not to wonder, what might still be unsolved inside me? And that difference matters more than most people realize. Most people don't connect those moments to emotional pain. I know I didn't. I thought what happened was in the past, and what I was feeling now, it just had to be something else. But here's something that changed how I see it. Sometimes the mind remembers what happened, and the body remembers what it felt like. When I first heard that, it explained a lot. Not just about my own experience, about what so many people carry quietly and rarely even talk about. Because it's hard to make sense of something you can't see. It's hard to be compassionate with yourself when you think you should be over it by now. And it's easy to assume something's wrong with you when nobody's ever explained that emotional pain can leave an impression long after the event itself has passed. Most people assume that understanding should be enough. If I understand what happened, I should just be over it. I shouldn't still feel affected. But that's not how it always works. You can know something's over and still feel the impact of it. You can understand an experience completely and still have moments when it catches up with you. Understanding something in your mind and releasing it from where it lives in the body, they can be two different things. One of the hardest parts of emotional pain, it's not the pain itself. It's what we start believing about ourselves because of it. We wonder why we're still affected, why something that happened years ago can still be present. Over time, many people begin to question themselves. They start wondering if they're being too sensitive, or why they can't seem to move on when everyone else around them has appeared to have moved on. After a while, the self-judgment can become almost as heavy as the original experience. I've seen this in people close to me, and I've felt it in myself. That quiet voice that says, "You should be past this by now." And here's this thing about that voice. It rarely helps. It mostly just adds another layer of weight on top of what's already there. Because you can't think your way out of something that's still being held inside. That's not a character flaw. It's just how things work. I've noticed it tends to slow things down rather than help. When something inside doesn't feel resolved, it doesn't let go. And shame doesn't create the kind of safety that allows that change to happen. What might be more helpful is a different question entirely. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with you?" what if you got a little curious about why you feel the way you do? Not to analyze it or fix it right now, just to understand it a little better. Because sometimes that's where things begin to shift. When we stop treating our reactions as evidence that we've failed and start seeing them as information, something worth listening to rather than fighting. The fact that something still affects you doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Sometimes it simply means the experience mattered. For a long time, a lot of people have been told to just push through. And most of us learn to keep moving. We go to work, we take care of what needs to be taken care of. Life doesn't stop because we're hurting. So we keep going. That low hum that follows you, the exhaustion that sleep doesn't seem to fix, the way certain situations can bring up feelings that seem out of proportion to what just happened. Those things aren't signs of weakness. In many cases, they're signs that something inside is waiting to be understood. Sometimes an experience ends long before its impact does. Most people don't choose that, and they certainly don't enjoy it. Something inside simply hasn't resolved yet. That doesn't mean it's broken. It means it's still responding. And here's what I've come to believe. The body holds pain because it hasn't felt safe enough to let it go. I've started to think of it less as a flaw and more as a signal that something inside is still waiting to be met. That question stayed with me. Why does pain stay in the body this way? Why can something be over and we still feel it inside? Why can a person understand what happened and still feel the impact of it years later? I wasn't looking for another way to talk about emotional pain. There are already plenty of ways to talk about it. I wanted to help people work through what they're feeling gently, without judgment, without having to relive every difficult thing that ever happened. That question eventually led me to create REHM and RAHM, not because people are broken, quite the opposite. What I kept seeing in myself and in others was that most people are responding in completely understandable ways to experiences that hadn't fully been resolved. What they often needed wasn't more analysis or more strategies. They needed a way to create enough safety inside themselves for something to finally begin to soften. REHM and RAHM grew out of that understanding. They're not a quick fix. They're simply gentle, repeatable processes that help people work with what they're feeling instead of fighting it. I'm not going to go deeply into them here. I just wanted you to know where they came from. They came from the same question this whole conversation began with. Why do so many good people spend years wondering what's wrong with them when maybe nothing is? Relief, it doesn't always look like everything being fixed, and it doesn't always mean every feeling disappears. Sometimes it begins in a much quieter place. In the moment we stop fighting ourselves. In the moment we start looking at our own experience with a little more gentleness and a little less judgment. If this conversation felt familiar to you, I'd love to have you here for the next one. There's so much more to explore together. So if you'd like to continue these conversations with me, I hope you'll subscribe. And if something in this video stirred something for you, feel free to leave a comment below. We're just getting started. I'll see you next week.